Seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that too. It's like, got over here and throw it. It's tough that you can say t-shirt. No, it's like t-shirt.
All right, guys. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap once. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap twice. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap 4 times. There we are. So, what are some things we want to keep in mind when we're talking to these kids about these incidents? Bumblebee.
So one thing we said, we actually talked about this before we started our session, is separate the idea and what was said from the person themselves.
Very good. Anybody else? Just blurt it out. I'm facing the wrong way.
We said like you never want to humiliate a kid in front of a group in any way. So a lot of situations, maybe you do have to address a group, like we don't say this, but talking one-on-one would be a better way.
Exactly. An important thing to remember here when talking to a child is that they are a child. And so what that means is that it's not cool to humiliate anyone, it's not cool to make fun of anyone, it's especially not cool as a grown person to make fun of a child. And so when these incidents happen, it's super important to keep in mind that, you want to be as discreet as possible. And while, you want the rest of the group to know that we don't, carry out these behaviors or whatever, it's also important to remember there's a time, a place, and certain language you should use. Another thing to keep in mind is don't argue with a child. That works for this, that works for everything. They're children. Do not argue with them. You are an adult. You shouldn't need to argue with children. You are a leader and you're their friend. You should be able to, if they make a mistake, if they do something wrong, you should be able to, as their friend, help them out. And as an older friend who knows a little bit more, you should be able to help guide them on the right path, rather than just yelling at them and arguing with them and telling them that, they're wrong. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's important not to abuse.
Exactly. This goes exactly back to separating the idea from the person. So when someone says something, that you might find offensive, that someone else might find offensive, don't tell them, oh, you are racist. Like, that's not cool to say. Say like, oh, some people might think that's pretty racist to say, maybe you shouldn't say that. Like, don't say that. It's super important to remember that, these kids are scared and vulnerable. And so if you call them, you calling them a racist is barely better than them calling someone, a mean name based on their race or their sexual orientation. It's important to remember that, they're probably not racist. They just need to be told that what they said is racist. And that they will then, they don't want to be racist. They'll then, fix themselves with your help. Anyone else?
So I was thinking who else was affected by it. So if it did harm someone, obviously that's another situation to deal with. But say it's an offensive joke, and you want to talk to the person who made that joke, but if his friends around him laughed at that joke, then it should be worth it to have a conversation with the people who also thought that was funny.
That's a really good point. You have to understand the range of who this affects, and it can affect some people by hurting them, and it can affect some other people by it might lead them to believe that certain things are okay or acceptable that are not okay or acceptable. And so it's important that you realize, if someone did laugh at that mean joke, you have to tell them that, that joke was not okay to make, that joke is pretty offensive, we shouldn't think it's so funny. And then, after that, it's also just important to remember, the most important thing is ensure physical safety first, and then after that, you want to ensure their emotional safety as well, obviously. Then how are you going to do this? Where we have an incident involving 2 people where one of them might be discriminated against or hurt, take care of the victim first every time. Make sure they're okay, talk to them through it, and what you want to explain to them is, you want to explain to them that this person made a hurtful comment. If you feel hurt, if you feel upset, good, you're allowed to feel that way because their feelings are valid and they're important. There should be, there should be no expectation for a child to forgive someone for making a mean remark like that. you know, if you explain to the kids that everything's gonna be okay, that we don't use that sort of language, that you'll have a talk with them, and they feel better, and they wanna forgive them later, that's totally up to them. What your job is to ensure is that the camper who was hurt is emotionally secure, and then after that, that they will be, you know, they don't have to forgive the other camper, they don't have to be their best friend, but that they can at least, you know, exist in the same group or the same unit as them for the remainder of camp. If they can't, that's a serious problem, and you have to report that to the directors and then to the camp advisors. Yeah, they shouldn't have the hurt camper if they don't want to. They don't have to talk to the camper who hurt them. They don't have to do anything except act civilly towards them. Because their feelings are of course valid, and it's important that they know. Some other tips they have listed here is that, you know, if there is a hurt camper and he says that, you know, he's still mad at the other camper, just explain to him and be like, look, it's my job as a counselor to make sure that people are nice to each other, that, you know, we're all accepting of each other. Like, I'm gonna go over there and explain to him, like, that's not righteous what he said. Like, I'll tell him that, like, and he'll know that. And, you know, tell him, like, I'm sorry this happened. If it happens again, please come let me know immediately. And immediately after any of these incidents, if they seem minor or not, bring them to the directors, bring them to the camp advisors. If the issue happens with the camp advisor, or if the issue happens with the directors, feel free to bring it to the other one, or if failing in that, you guys will have Kitty's information, or Kitty's replacements information, I suppose.
Yeah.
If, you know, you have a problem with the camp advisors, or the directors, or another counselor, and, you know, the directors or the camp advisors, or whoever isn't dealing with it, you can escalate it all the way up to the program director, contact them, and they will be, you know, very receptive to you and making sure that you feel comfortable and accepted. But after any of these incidents, report it to the camp advisor, report it to the directors. It's important they know, even if it's not a offense that they'll be sent home for, even if it's not a super important offense, it's just important that the directors and the program, or that the directors and the camp advisors know exactly what's happened and exactly what's going on. So if something else happens, or something happens where all of a sudden it's really valuable information to know that there was a racist incident or a sexist incident involving this camper earlier in camp, they need to have that information. Yep. And then there's just some examples in here of other things. You know, the same way that we kind of prevent these, you know, like, they talk about how, like, all of these, you know, like, minor racist incidents where, you know, like, a camper picks a name that, you know, appropriated another culture, and then that turns into people thinking, you know, that turns into people making jokes about their name, and then that turns into people making really mean jokes about, you know, a certain race of people. And so it got out of hand really fast, which is why we need to report these incidents quickly, and we need to deal with them just as fast. So that's pretty much it with that section. Does anyone have anything else they want to say about, you know, how we should deal with, how we should react to these? Either, you know, like very concretely, like going to the program directors, or, you know, like a little more abstractly, like how we should treat these kids. Rock on. All right, next section is titled Identifying and Interrupting Prejudice and Microaggressions at Camp. So, does someone want to give me a definition of microaggressions, or should I? I will. Microaggressions are the everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group membership. And then the other definition they have for prejudice is an unjustified or incorrect attitude, usually negative, towards an individual based solely on that individual's membership in a certain social group. So, what's the consensus on these things? Prejudice and microaggressions, bad, right? Big thumbs down. So, important, how do we deal with microaggressions? We use interruptions. So interruptions are a skill used to address microaggressions. The goal of an interruption is to encourage respectful communication, destroy isms and stereotypes, and educate and learn together. So, first things first. What do some microaggressions look like? Does anyone have any examples? Rock on. So, some examples of microaggressions are if you do have a non-binary or a transsexual camper in your cabin, and there's one camper who always calls them by, you know, the wrong pronouns, or by pronouns they prefer not to use, microaggression. You want to be on the lookout for, like they said, They're small things, they're little social snubs. They're, so far as campers might, feel uncomfortable giving a kid of a certain race or of a certain sexuality a high five. And it's just stuff like that you need to look out for. And so when you see one of these microaggressions, you want to interrupt it. How are you going to interrupt it? You're going to interrupt it by creating a positive conversation. The first thing is that when you interrupt, you have to interrupt the behavior. So whatever it's in the middle of, if say it is someone using the wrong pronouns, you want to stop, you want to stop them right away, whatever you're in the middle of, and be like, hey, look, so-and-so really asked that you call him/her/them, these pronouns, like, you really should use those when you're talking to them. And the camper replies with, oh, like, I just forget all the time, he looks like a girl anyway, so, it's hard for me to remember. It's important for you to put your foot down and say, you want to create a positive conversation. And so the first thing is you don't want to attack this person. Because if you attack this person, they'll get defensive, and once they're, all locked up, then it's going to be impossible to have a real conversation. So, good ways to avoid attacking people. Rapid fire. Does anybody know good ways to avoid attacking people in confrontation?
You versus the issue, not you versus them.
That's the one.
Us versus the issues.
Exactly.
Make sure you listen to them, let them talk.
Exactly. You want to listen to them, you want to let them talk, say why they do these things before you start making assumptions about, who they are, what they believe. Other ones.
It's a small thing, but body language, don't like stand like your chest like towards them, like straight on, because it makes it seem confrontational. If you like kind of stand next to them, it makes them get on the same team.
That's a big one.
Something you've actually done every time you describe a situation and you do your bad response and your good response is your tone of voice changes very drastically. So if your voice sounds really harsh and angry, that's more of an attack. Whereas if you sound more open, then it's a much more welcoming tone. So that can do a lot.
Use questions, it's different, if you just accuse someone versus asking why are you saying, why are you saying that, or what leads you to think that's true, then that draws them into the conversation and creates a dialogue rather than you just chewing someone out.
Mm-hmm. And, sorry, but it says right on the paper, avoid starting questions with why. Why, because when you ask someone oh, what did you say, how did that question make you feel? How did that question make this person feel? Versus when you say why, people feel the need to